They always say that in America, if you work hard and keep your head down, you'll be rewarded. I believed that once, until I was fired for one vague reason: attitude. But when I walked away in silence, they were the ones who started trembling. You see, there's something about a quiet exit that terrifies people more than any shouting match ever could. They expected anger, threats, maybe even tears. What they got was nothing, and that nothing became everything they feared. My name is Rachel Morgan, and for 6 years, I poured everything I had into North Point Media Group. The Denver skyline outside our 15th floor office had become as familiar to me as my own reflection. I'd watched it through countless late nights, early mornings, and weekend shifts that nobody asked for but everyone expected. North Point wasn't just another media company. It was a pressure cooker disguised as a creative powerhouse. The lobby gleamed with awards and accolades. But behind the frosted glass doors, it was a different story. Every morning, I'd badge in at 7:30 a.m. sharp, passing the motivational posters that preached teamwork and excellence, while the reality whispered something else entirely: survive, comply, and never question. I'd built my reputation on results. My campaigns didn't just meet KPIs, they exceeded them by margins that made even the C-suite take notice. Client retention in my portfolio sat at 92%, a number that Mark Dillard, my direct supervisor, loved to parade in board meetings. He'd stand there in his pressed Brooks Brothers suit, taking credit for strategies I developed during nights when he was home with his family, living the work-life balance he preached but never extended to his team. The unspoken rules at North Point were simple but suffocating. Smile at the right people. Laugh at executives' jokes, especially the ones that weren't funny. Never point out inefficiencies if they came from above. And most importantly, never, ever have what they called an attitude. My sin? I'd started asking questions. Why were we pitching strategies we knew wouldn't work just because senior management liked them? Why did contractors get terminated days before their benefits kicked in? Why did the diversity initiatives only seem to promote people who looked and thought exactly like the existing leadership? These weren't accusations, they were observations shared in meetings when asked for honest feedback. But in North Point's dictionary, honesty from someone like me translated to attitude problem. The Whisper Network, that invisible communication channel every office has, started buzzing about me 3 months ago. Conversations would halt when I entered the break room. Meeting invites would arrive last minute, sometimes after decisions had already been made. My input, once sought after, became something to be managed around rather than incorporated. Sarah, the only other woman on my team, pulled me aside one Thursday afternoon. "Rachel, you need to be careful," she'd said, glancing nervously toward Mark's corner office. "They're building a case." "A case for what? I haven't done anything wrong." She'd given me that look, the one that said I was being naive. Since when has that mattered? The final straw came during a client presentation for Morrison Automotive, a multi-million-dollar account. Mark had insisted on a strategy that was not only outdated, but potentially damaging to their brand. When the client expressed concerns that mirrored mine exactly, I'd made the mistake of saying, "I actually prepared an alternative approach that addresses those specific concerns." The room had gone silent. Mark's face had turned that particular shade of corporate crimson that meant someone had crossed an invisible line. I'd saved the account that day. Morrison loved the alternative strategy, but I'd also signed my own termination letter. The productivity theater continued for 2 more weeks. I kept showing up, kept delivering, kept pretending I didn't notice the HR representative who suddenly seemed very interested in documenting my arrival and departure times. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was in bold, underlined, and highlighted for emphasis. But I'd learned something valuable during those 6 years at North Point. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't to fight back. Sometimes it's to simply stop playing their game altogether. So I continued my work, met my deadlines, and waited for the inevitable with a strange sense of calm that seemed to unsettle them more than any outburst would have. They thought they were in control. They thought they understood the game we were playing. They had no idea that when you push someone to the edge, sometimes they don't fall, sometimes they learn to fly. The call came on a Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was in the middle of reviewing analytics for the Morrison campaign, the one I'd saved just 2 weeks earlier. The phone display showed the HR extension, and my stomach didn't drop so much as it simply acknowledged what we both knew was coming. Rachel, could you please come to conference room B? Bring your laptop and company phone. The walk down that hallway felt both endless and instant. My heels clicked against the polished floor with a rhythm that seemed to count down to something final. Colleagues I'd worked with for years suddenly found their screens fascinating, their keyboards urgent, their phone calls immediate. Nobody made eye contact. In corporate America, termination is contagious. Proximity to the condemned might mark you as next. Conference room B was deliberately chosen, no windows, tucked away from high-traffic areas, close to the security desk. Mark Dillard sat at the head of the table, avoiding my gaze while shuffling papers he wasn't reading. Beside him, Jennifer from HR had her termination script ready, complete with a tissue box positioned strategically within reach. They'd done this before. Rachel, please have a seat, Jennifer said, her voice professionally sympathetic, like a surgeon who's performed too many amputations. Mark finally looked up, his expression carved from corporate marble. Rachel, we've made the difficult decision to terminate your employment with North Point Media Group, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. 6 years of exceeding targets, salvaging disasters, mentoring juniors, and this was how it ended, in a windowless room with fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. The reason? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jennifer jumped in, reading from her script. We've documented ongoing concerns about attitude and cultural fit. Despite previous conversations, we haven't seen the improvement we'd hoped for. Previous conversations. They meant the one informal check-in where Mark had vaguely suggested I should be more aligned with leadership vision. No written warnings. No performance improvement plan. Just nebulous concerns about my attitude. That corporate scarlet letter that could mean anything and therefore meant nothing. I felt the rage building, hot and sharp, ready to spill over. Every late night, every weekend, every time I'd chosen North Point over my personal life flashed through my mind. My hands wanted to shake, my voice wanted to scream, my eyes wanted to cry. They were prepared for all of it. Jennifer's tissue box practically glowed with anticipation. But then something strange happened. The rage hit a wall of clarity so cold and clear it took my breath away. I saw the scene from above. 2 corporate executioners waiting for their victim to play her assigned role. Cry, beg, threaten, negotiate. Give them the emotional response they could document, discuss, and dismiss. Instead, I smiled. Not broadly, not sarcastically. Just a small, genuine smile as if I'd suddenly understood the punchline to a joke I'd been missing for years. Okay, I said simply. Mark blinked. Jennifer's hand hovered over the tissue box. Okay, Mark repeated, uncertain. Yes, I understand. I slid my laptop and phone across the table with the same calm precision I'd used to present winning strategies. I assume you have paperwork for me to sign. Jennifer fumbled with the separation agreement, clearly thrown off script. She launched into the standard warnings about proprietary information, non-disparagement clauses, and the 2-week severance that was supposed to buy my silence. I signed where indicated, my signature steady and unremarkable. Do you have any questions? Jennifer asked, visibly uncomfortable with my composure. No questions. Thank you for the opportunity. The words were corporate autopilot, but my delivery was so serene it seemed to unnerve them more than tears would have. Mark shifted in his seat. Rachel, I want you to know this wasn't personal. Of course not, I interrupted gently. It never is. Security was supposed to escort me out. But Tom, the guard who'd known me for years, looked almost apologetic as he walked beside me to my desk. I'd already been locked out of my computer. They'd done that while I was in conference room B. Efficient. I picked up only my personal items. A photo of my sister, my coffee mug, a small succulent that had somehow survived the fluorescent wasteland. The entire floor was silent as I packed. Every eye was on me while pretending not to be. They expected a scene, a breakdown, something to gossip about for weeks. Instead, I moved with the deliberate grace of someone who'd already left this place mentally and was simply allowing my body to catch up. At the elevator, I turned back once. The office hummed with its usual false energy, but underneath, I could feel it, the discomfort, the unease. They'd fired me, but my silence had fired something back. A shot they didn't see coming and couldn't quite name. As the elevator doors closed, I heard Mark's voice, sharp and stressed, calling someone into his office. The panic had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The aftermath of my departure spread through North Point like a virus without symptoms, invisible but infectious. I heard about it through the network of former employees who'd escaped before me, each one eager to share the delicious chaos unfolding in my wake. Sarah texted me that night. The entire floor is spooked. Nobody can figure out why you didn't fight back. Mark's been in his office all day with the door closed. By Wednesday, the cracks were already showing. The Morrison Automotive team called asking specifically for me, only to be told I was no longer with the company. The silence that followed, Sarah reported, was deafening. Mark had scrambled to assign the account to Derek, a yes man with half my experience and none of my client relationships. The client's response was politely brutal. They'd reassess the partnership at the next quarterly review. But it wasn't just Morrison. I'd been the invisible thread holding together 3 major campaigns, 2 product launches, and a complete rebrand for Tech Solutions that was supposed to roll out in 2 weeks. My files were meticulously organized. I'd made sure of that. But files don't explain the delicate psychology of client management, the unwritten rules of each account, the careful balance of personalities I'd spent years calibrating. Thursday brought the first wave of real panic. Derek had botched a presentation for Morrison, using the old strategy Mark had insisted on, the one the client had already rejected. He didn't know about the alternative approach because it had lived in my head and my personal notes, which had left with me in that small cardboard box. The marketing team discovered that I'd been the only one who knew how to navigate the Byzantine approval process for Tech Solutions. What looked like standard procedure was actually a complex dance of egos and territorial disputes that I'd managed through careful relationship building. Without that knowledge, the rebrand stalled, caught in an endless loop of revisions and miscommunications. By Friday, the Whisper network was in overdrive. I hadn't sent a single text, made a single call, or posted anything on social media. My LinkedIn still showed me at North Point. I hadn't even updated it yet, but my silence was speaking volumes. It's creepy, I heard from Alex, a designer who still grabbed drinks with my old team. Everyone keeps expecting you to do something, file a complaint, write a Glassdoor review, something, but you've just vanished. Mark keeps asking people if they've heard from you. The weekend brought more revelations. 3 key freelancers I'd cultivated relationships with politely declined to renew their contracts with North Point. They didn't mention me. They didn't have to. They simply had other commitments. The company's go-to photographer suddenly became perpetually booked. The copywriter who could capture any brand's voice developed scheduling conflicts. But the real fear started Monday of the following week, when HR began conducting stay interviews with my former team members. Jennifer sat with each person, asking about their satisfaction, their future plans, their concerns. The subtext was clear. They were terrified that my quiet exit might inspire others. And they were right to be afraid. Tom from IT, who'd watched the company fire 3 women in 6 months for attitude problems, put in his notice. He didn't mention me, but he didn't have to. Lisa from Accounts Receivable, who'd been denied promotion twice despite glowing reviews, started taking longer lunches that everyone knew were interviews. The exodus hadn't begun yet, but the foundation was crumbling. Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He micromanaged every aspect of the Morrison account, second-guessing Derek's decisions while simultaneously being unable to provide clear direction. He called impromptu all-hands meetings about team cohesion and corporate culture, using corporate buzzwords like armor against the growing unease. the leadership team started asking questions. Why had they lost such a high-performing employee without a succession plan? Why were client relationships suddenly so fragile? Why did morale seem to be plummeting when they'd just removed a negative element? The most beautiful part was that I hadn't orchestrated any of it. I'd simply stopped being the buffer between North Point's dysfunction and its consequences. Without me absorbing the chaos, smoothing the edges, and quietly fixing problems before they became visible, the company was forced to confront what it actually was: a house of cards built on the unrecognized labor of people it didn't value. Jennifer from HR called me that Tuesday, her voice carefully professional, but tinged with something that sounded like desperation. "Rachel, we're conducting an exit interview and wondered if you'd be available to share your feedback about your experience at North Point." "Thank you for reaching out," I replied, my voice pleasant and empty. "I don't think that will be necessary." The pause on her end was profound. "We'd really value your insights." "I'm sure you would. Have a wonderful day, Jennifer." I hung up gently, but I knew that soft click echoed through their offices like a gunshot. They wanted my anger, my grievances, my pain, anything they could categorize, document, and file away. Instead, I gave them nothing, and nothing, it turns out, was the most terrifying thing of all. My apartment in Capitol Hill became my headquarters for reinvention. It was a small one-bedroom with exposed brick and large windows that caught the morning light, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Paid for by years of those overtime hours North Point had demanded but never officially acknowledged. The first week after termination, I didn't set an alarm. I woke naturally at 7:30 anyway, my body still programmed for corporate time. But instead of rushing to make it to the office, I walked to the local coffee shop, Hudson's Brew, where the barista already knew my order but had never seen me at 8 a.m. on a weekday before. "Playing hooky?" Jamie asked, sliding my cortado across the counter. "Something like that," I replied, taking my drink to the corner table by the window. That table became my office. While North Point scrambled to fill the void I'd left, I sat with my laptop and began rebuilding. Not just my career, myself. The woman who'd walked into that building 6 years ago was gone. The woman sitting in Hudson's Brew was something else entirely. I started with the basics: LLC formation, business license, website domain. Morgan Strategic Communications had a clean, professional ring to it. No flashy promises, no corporate buzzwords, just my name and what I did. The website was minimalist, a single page with contact information and one line: Strategic Communications Consulting for brands ready to evolve. The freedom was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. No meetings about meetings, no politics, no Mark Dillard taking credit for my ideas, but also no steady paycheck, no health insurance, no safety net except the 3 months of expenses I'd managed to save. I reached out to my network carefully, strategically. Not the people still at North Point, that would come later, but former colleagues who'd escaped to other companies, freelancers I'd worked with, clients who'd moved on to new ventures. The message was simple: I was now independent and available for consulting work. The responses surprised me. Within 3 days, I had 2 coffee meetings scheduled and a request for proposal from a startup looking to rebrand. Word traveled fast in Denver's business community, and my reputation, it seemed, existed independently of North Point's corporate machinery. Lisa Huang, who'd left North Point 2 years earlier to become CMO at a tech startup, met me at Union Station on a Thursday afternoon. "I heard about what happened," she said without preamble. "Their loss? I've been wanting to poach you for years." "I'm not looking for another corporate position," I said carefully. "Good. I don't want an employee. I want a consultant who can fix what my internal team can't see because they're too deep in it." The contract she offered was worth 2 months of my North Point salary for 6 weeks of work. I signed it that afternoon. The nights were harder. When the laptop closed and the strategic planning stopped, the anger I'd suppressed in that termination meeting would surface. I'd replay every slight, every stolen idea, every dismissive comment. Some nights, I'd draft scathing emails to Mark, to Jennifer, to the CEO who probably didn't even know my name. I never sent them. Instead, I channeled that energy into something more useful. Research. I studied Northpoint's client list, their contract renewal dates, their key personnel. Not from any insider information. All of it was publicly available if you knew where to look. Press releases, LinkedIn updates, industry newsletters. I mapped out their vulnerabilities like a general planning a campaign. Not yet sure if I'd ever use the intelligence, but comforted by having it. 3 weeks into my independence, I ran into Derek at Whole Foods. He was in the prepared foods section, looking haggard, his usual swagger notably absent. "Rachel," he said, freezing with a container of overpriced soup in his hand. "Derek," I responded pleasantly, continuing to select my groceries. "How are things?" He was fishing, obviously sent or hoping to gather intelligence. "Things are wonderful. How's Morrison?" His face went pale. We're managing." "Good to hear," I said, moving past him toward the checkout. "Take care, Derek." I left him standing there, probably wondering if he should report our interaction to Mark. If my cheerfulness was genuine or strategic. If I was planning something or had simply moved on. Let them wonder. My sister called that night from Seattle. "You sound different," she said after we'd talked for a few minutes. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you've put down something heavy you've been carrying." She was right. The constant anxiety of navigating Northpoint's dysfunction, of protecting myself while producing results, of being perpetually on guard, it was gone. In its place was something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. I worked from coffee shops, from the library, from my apartment at whatever hours made sense. I took walks in the middle of the day. I said no to projects that didn't interest me and yes to ones that did. I was making less money. Technically. But my hourly rate was triple what Northpoint had paid me. And I worked half the hours. The 4th week brought an unexpected email. It was from Morrison Automotive's marketing director, sent directly to my personal email. "Hi, Rachel. I hope this finds you well. We heard you've gone independent. We'd love to discuss some upcoming projects if you're available." I stared at that email for a full minute, then smiled. I hadn't reached out to them. I hadn't violated any non-solicitation agreement. They had come to me. I crafted my response carefully, professionally, making no mention of Northpoint or the work I'd done for them there. Just a simple acknowledgement and a suggestion to meet the following week. That night, I sat on my fire escape with a glass of wine, watching the Denver skyline light up. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Mark Dillard was probably still at his desk, trying to hold together accounts he'd never bothered to understand. Jennifer from HR was likely updating resumes, sensing which way the wind was blowing. And me, I was free. Not just from Northpoint, but from the belief that I needed them more than they needed me. The silence of my exit hadn't been surrender. It had been strategy. And the game was just beginning. The unraveling of Northpoint Media Group happened in slow motion, then all at once. Like watching a building collapse from the inside, first dust falling from the ceiling, then cracks in the walls, then suddenly everything coming down. Morrison Automotive was the first domino. Their quarterly review came exactly 6 weeks after my termination, and Derek had fumbled it spectacularly. Sarah, still my inside source, sent me a text that simply read, "Morrison just pulled out, emergency meeting happening now." The contract was worth $8 million annually, not enough to sink Northpoint, but enough to cause serious bleeding. Mark had apparently turned white when the news came through, then red, then something Sarah described as a color that doesn't exist in nature. But Morrison was just the beginning. Tech Solutions, frustrated by the rebrand delays, demanded a 50% reduction in fees or they'd walk. The negotiations turned ugly when it became clear that nobody at Northpoint actually understood the technical requirements of the project. I'd been the translator between their tech team and our creative department. The freelancer exodus accelerated. My photographer friend, Marcus, later told me he'd been offered triple his usual rate to stay on retainer, but he'd declined. It wasn't about the money, he said over drinks. The place felt toxic. like everyone was waiting for something bad to happen. Inside North Point, paranoia was becoming policy. Mark instituted new collaboration protocols that were essentially surveillance measures. All client communications had to be copied to management. Project files were moved to shared drives with access logs. Trust, already fragile, shattered completely. The second wave of departures began in week 8. Tom from IT, who'd already given notice, was followed by 2 senior designers and an account manager. Each exit interview was met with the same mysterious silence I'd pioneered. They gave no actionable feedback, aired no grievances, just smiled and left. Jennifer from HR was drowning. She called me again, this time with less pretense. Rachel, I'm reaching out because we're conducting a comprehensive review of our termination processes. Your insights would be valuable in helping us improve. Jennifer, I interrupted gently. We both know why you're really calling. The silence stretched between us. I can't help you, I continued. Whatever's happening at North Point isn't my concern anymore. They're saying you're behind this, she blurted out, professionalism cracking. That you're orchestrating some kind of revenge. That's interesting, I said mildly. Have I contacted any current employees, violated any agreements, made any public statements about the company? No, but then I'm not sure what they're saying I've done. Have a good day, Jennifer. The truth was more elegant than any revenge plot I could have orchestrated. North Point had built its success on the backs of employees it didn't value, creating single points of failure it didn't recognize. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped being the load-bearing wall in their house of cards. Week 10 brought the news that made me actually laugh out loud. Mark Dillard had been reassigned to special projects, corporate speak for being stripped of power while they figured out how to ease him out. His replacement was an external hire who immediately requested a full audit of all client accounts. The audit revealed what I already knew. North Point had been hemorrhaging talent and clients for months before my departure, but I'd been papering over the cracks. My quiet exit had simply removed the bandage from a wound that was already fatal. The industry newsletters picked up the story. North Point Media faces client exodus amid leadership shakeup. They quoted anonymous sources describing a toxic culture and management failures. I wondered how many of those sources were still inside, finally feeling safe enough to speak truth because the ship was already sinking. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. New CEO just announced 15% layoffs. Mark's been let go. Jennifer, too. I should have felt vindicated, victorious even. Instead, I felt oddly empty. These people who'd controlled my life for 6 years, who dismissed me with corporate cruelty, were now experiencing the same disposability they'd inflicted on others. But their suffering didn't undo mine. Their failure didn't equal my success. That afternoon, I met with Morrison's marketing director at a steakhouse downtown. He was everything Mark hadn't been: direct, respectful, interested in actual results rather than corporate theater. We want to retain you for all our communications strategy going forward, he said over appetizers. Full creative control, no middleman, direct reporting to me. The contract he slid across the table was worth more than my annual salary at North Point. We know what you did for us while you were there, he continued. We also know they never valued it. We won't make that mistake. As I signed the contract, my phone lit up with a LinkedIn notification. Mark Dillard had updated his status to seeking new opportunities. His profile now described him as a transformational leader with a track record of building high-performance teams. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That evening, local business reporter Katie Martinez called me. Rachel, I'm writing a piece about the changes at North Point. Would you care to comment? This was my chance. I could destroy them publicly, air every grievance, every slight, every injustice. The reporter was offering me a loaded gun and asking if I wanted to pull the trigger. No comment, I said pleasantly. I wish North Point all the best in their future endeavors. Katie paused, clearly surprised. Nothing at all. You were a key player there for 6 years. I'm focused on my current clients and building my consultancy. The past is the past. The The silence was my statement. It said everything while saying nothing. And it left them no ammunition to claim I was bitter or vindictive. I was simply gone. And my absence was the loudest accusation of all. The real revenge wasn't emotional, it was methodical, strategic, and completely legal. Every move I made was simply good business. But collectively, they formed a pattern that would have made Machiavelli proud. It started with the talent acquisition. Lisa Huang's startup needed a creative director. And I happened to know Sarah was miserable at North Point after witnessing the post-termination chaos. I made the introduction. Sarah got a 40% raise and equity options. North Point lost their last senior employee who understood the Morrison account. Then came the contractors. I incorporated them into my growing network, offering them consistent work at better rates than North Point ever had. Marcus the photographer. 3 designers, 2 copywriters, they became my extended team. We operated like a guerrilla unit, lean and flexible, taking on projects that would have required twice the resources at a traditional agency. The masterstroke came when I learned about North Point's pitch for Colorado Tourism Board, a $20 million contract that would keep them afloat after losing Morrison. I knew their playbook, flashy presentation, big promises, strategy that looked innovative but was actually recycled from 3 previous campaigns. I didn't compete directly. Instead, I partnered with a small Denver agency, Elevation Creative, bringing my team as strategic consultants. Our pitch was everything North Point's wasn't: authentic, grounded in actual data, focused on measurable results rather than impressive presentations. The night before the pitch, I ran into Jennifer at a wine bar in Lodo. She looked exhausted, stress etched into every line of her face. She'd survived the layoffs, but was clearly job hunting. "Rachel," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and something like fear. "Jennifer, you look well." I lied politely. She laughed bitterly. "We both know that's not true." After a pause, she added, "They blame you, for everything." "That must be comforting for them," I said, sipping my wine. "Having someone to blame." "How did you do it?" she asked quietly. "How did you destroy us without lifting a finger?" "I didn't destroy anything, Jennifer. I just stopped propping up something that was already falling." She studied me for a long moment. "They're going to lose the tourism board pitch. The new CEO has no idea what he's doing, and the team is in shambles." "That's unfortunate," I said neutrally. "We're pitching against Elevation Creative," she continued. "I heard you're consulting for them." I said nothing, just smiled slightly. "Is this what revenge looks like?" she asked. "No," I replied honestly. "This is what business looks like when it's not personal." The Colorado Tourism Board announcement came the following Friday. Elevation Creative, with Morgan Strategic Communications as their partner, had won the contract. The press release praised our innovative approach and deep understanding of authentic storytelling. My phone exploded with texts and calls. Former colleagues congratulating me, industry contacts wanting to collaborate. Even some current North Point employees quietly reaching out about opportunities. I responded to them all professionally, making no mention of my former employer. But the universe wasn't done with its poetic justice. That afternoon, an email arrived from an unexpected source, Robert Chen, CEO of Chen Enterprises, one of North Point's oldest and most lucrative clients. "Ms. Morgan, I've been following your recent work with great interest. We're reviewing our agency relationships and would value your perspective. Would you be available for a consultation?" Chen Enterprises was North Point's white whale, $30 million in annual billing, the client that kept the lights on. Losing them would be fatal. And now their CEO was reaching out to me directly. I crafted my response carefully. I agreed to a consultation, making it clear I would only discuss Chen Enterprises' future needs, not their current arrangements. I wasn't going to actively sabotage North Point. I didn't need to. Their own incompetence was doing that perfectly well. The meeting with Robert Chen was illuminating. He wasn't interested in drama or gossip. He wanted results. And he'd noticed that everything North Point had delivered successfully in recent years had my fingerprints on it. We're not happy with the recent quality, he said bluntly. Since you left, there's been a noticeable decline. Change can be challenging for any organization, I said diplomatically. Don't give me corporate speak, Rachel. I get enough of that from them. Should we stay or go? That's not for me to say, but I can tell you what you need from any agency partner. I laid out a strategic framework that was essentially everything Northpoint wasn't: transparent, agile, results-focused. He nodded slowly. Could you provide this? My company could handle strategic consulting. For execution, I'd recommend a partnership approach with several specialized agencies, including Elevation Creative, among others. A week later, Chen Enterprises announced they were restructuring their agency partnerships to better align with evolving market needs. Northpoint was retained for basic maintenance work, about 10% of their original contract. The strategic work went to a consortium led by Morgan Strategic Communications. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile when I heard the news. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about building something better from the ashes of something broken. That night, I got one final call from Mark Dillard. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. You destroyed my career, he said without preamble, his voice slurred with alcohol. No, Mark. You destroyed your career when you decided that managing up was more important than managing well. I just stopped saving you from yourself. This was all calculated, wasn't it? From the moment you walked out. Actually, no. I interrupted. The moment I walked out, I wanted nothing to do with any of you. Everything that happened after? That was just me building my business. The fact that it coincided with your downfall? That's correlation, not causation. You're lying. Believe what you need to. Mark, it won't change anything. I hung up gently, then blocked his number. The past was finally, truly done. The call from Mark came on a gray Thursday morning, 3 months after Northpoint had been acquired by a larger agency for a fraction of its former value. I was reviewing contracts in my new office. Yes, I'd finally moved beyond coffee shops to a proper space in a converted warehouse in Reno, when his name appeared on my phone. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, Mark. Rachel. His voice was different, stripped of its corporate armor, almost human. Thank you for taking my call. What can I do for you? I kept my tone neutral, professional. I'm calling to ask if you'd consider meeting with me. With us, actually. The remaining leadership team from Northpoint. The remaining leadership team? I couldn't hide my surprise. Who's left? Not many, he admitted. But the new owners, they're trying to salvage what they can. They want to bring back key talent, people who understood the clients. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything unsaid. They want me to convince you to come back, he continued. As a senior partner, your own team, direct report to the CEO, the compensation package is substantial. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Denver skyline. From here, I could see the building where Northpoint's offices used to be. They'd downsized to 2 floors from 5. You're serious, I said, not quite a question. Deadly serious. Rachel, I made a mistake. I know that now. The way you were treated, the termination, it was wrong. We lost everything after you left. You lost everything because you built nothing sustainable, I corrected gently. I was a symptom, not the cause. Either way, we need you. The old Rachel might have felt vindicated by this moment. The current Rachel just felt tired. I'll meet with you, I said finally. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., but not at your office. Hudson's Brew on 15th. Thank you, Rachel. You won't regret. It's just a conversation, Mark. The next afternoon, Hudson's Brew was busy with its usual mix of freelancers and students. I chose the same corner table where I'd built my company, watching the door. Mark arrived 5 minutes early, looking older, grayer, diminished. Behind him was someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and careful posture. Rachel, This is Diana Chen, the new CEO, Mark said as they sat down. I kept my expression neutral despite the irony of the name. Ms. Chen, please call me Diana. I've heard a great deal about you. Rachel. All of it impressive. Thank you. Diana leaned forward, cutting straight to business. I'll be frank. North Point is hemorrhaging. We've lost 70% of our client base and most of our talent. The acquisition gave us runway, but without expertise, we're just burning cash. That sounds like a difficult position, I said carefully. It's a disaster, she said bluntly. Mark tells me you were the glue holding things together. I've reviewed the accounts. Your fingerprints are on every successful campaign from the last 5 years. I was part of a team. A team that fell apart the moment you left. Diana pulled out a folder. This is our offer. Senior partner, equity stake, your own division. You name your team, your terms, your clients. Essentially, a company within the company. I didn't touch the folder. Why would I give up my independence to return to a sinking ship? Because with you, it might not sink, Diana said. And because the resources we can offer, even diminished, exceed what you can access as a boutique consultancy. Mark had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke. Rachel, I owe you an apology. I let my ego, my insecurity, drive decisions that were not just wrong, but destructive. You challenged me, and instead of listening, I silenced you. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air like an unexpected gift. I studied his face, searching for the angle, the manipulation, but all I saw was a broken man who'd learned his lesson too late. I appreciate that, Mark, I said finally. But apologies don't undo damage. No, he agreed. They don't. Diana pushed the folder closer. Just look at it, take your time. This offer stands for 1 week. I picked up the folder, but didn't open it. I'll review it, but I need you both to understand something. I'm not the same person you fired 6 months ago. That woman who absorbed dysfunction, who fixed problems quietly, who accepted being undervalued, she's gone. Good, Diana said firmly. She sounds like someone we didn't deserve. After they left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour. The folder unopened in front of me. Jamie, the barista, brought me a second cortado without being asked. Heavy decision? She asked, nodding at the folder. You could say that. You know what I think, Jamie said. Sometimes the best revenge isn't watching them fail. It's being successful enough that you get to choose whether to help them or not. That evening, I called my sister in Seattle. They want me back, I said without preamble. Of course they do, she laughed. The question is, what do you want? What did I want? 6 months ago, I'd wanted them to suffer. 3 months ago, I'd wanted to prove I didn't need them. Now, sitting in my own office, with my own clients, my own success, I realized I didn't want anything from them at all. I opened the folder. The number was staggering, 3 times my highest year at North Point, plus equity that could be worth millions if they recovered. They were essentially offering to buy my company and make me a senior partner in one move. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It had never really been about the money. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Heard about the offer. Whatever you decide, you've already won. She was right. The moment I'd walked out of that conference room without begging or crying, I'd won. Everything since had just been victory laps. The decision came to me at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not in some grand moment of clarity, but in the quiet recognition of who I'd become. I was sitting in my apartment, laptop closed, looking out at the Denver lights scattered like broken glass across the darkness. The offer folder from North Point sat on my coffee table, its corporate weight trying to pull me back into an orbit I'd escaped. I picked up my phone and typed a simple email to Diana Chen. Thank you for the generous offer. After careful consideration, I must respectfully decline. I wish you and the team success in rebuilding North Point. Best regards, Rachel Morgan. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning brought the expected callbacks, texts, even an email from Diana increasing the offer by 20%. Mark sent a personal plea that bordered on desperate. But my decision wasn't about money or vindication anymore. It was about something simpler and more profound. I liked who I was now. Morgan Strategic Communications had 12 steady clients, 4 part-time contractors who felt more like partners than employees, and a waiting list of businesses wanting to work with us. We were small but mighty, agile in ways North Point could never be. More importantly, every success was ours, every decision was mine, and every relationship was built on mutual respect rather than corporate hierarchy. 2 weeks later, I read in the Denver Business Journal that North Point Media Group would be closing its Denver office, consolidating operations to Chicago. The article mentioned strategic restructuring and market optimization. But I knew the truth. They were retreating, downsizing, becoming another absorbed entity in a larger corporate machine. Sarah called me that afternoon. "Did you see the news?" "I saw it." "Any regrets about not taking the offer?" "None," I said, and meant it. "How's the new job?" "Amazing. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Lisa wants to know if you'd consider a partnership for that Tech Summit campaign. Send me the details. Let's talk next week." Life moved forward. My company grew. Not exponentially, but sustainably. We took on projects that mattered, clients who valued creativity over corporate theater. Work that made me excited to wake up in the morning. 6 months after declining North Point's offer, I was giving a presentation at a marketing conference about building authentic client relationships. The room was packed, my slides were minimal, and my message was simple: respect your talent, value your people, and never mistake silence for weakness. During the Q&A, someone asked, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned about leaving a toxic workplace?" I thought for a moment. That your exit doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the most devastating response to disrespect is dignity. They expected me to rage, to burn bridges, to give them a story where I was the villain. Instead, I gave them nothing. And that nothing became everything. After the presentation, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "I was fired last week," she said, "for attitude. Just like you. I've been so angry, so ready to lash out." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think I'll try silence and building something better." That night, alone in my apartment, I sat in the same spot where I'd made my decision months earlier. The Denver skyline looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. The building where North Point used to be was dark, their floors empty, their presence erased. But I wasn't looking at what was gone. I was looking at what was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then curiosity won. "Rachel, this is Diana Chen. North Point is closing permanently next month. I wanted you to know you were right to decline our offer. You were never meant to fix broken things. You were meant to build better ones. Congratulations on your success. It's well-deserved." I read the message twice, then deleted it. The past had said its final piece. Outside, Denver hummed with its usual energy. Startups rising, companies falling, dreams being built and destroyed in the endless cycle of American corporate life. But I was no longer a participant in that cycle. I was something else now. An architect of my own destiny, a builder of my own empire, however small. They'd fired me for having an attitude. They were right, I did have an attitude. An attitude that said I was worth more than their dysfunction, stronger than their politics, and better than their small vision of what I could be. And in the end, that attitude hadn't cost me everything. It had given me everything. I smiled at my reflection in the window, not the mysterious smile I'd worn walking out of North Point, but a real one. Genuine. Earned. They thought silence meant surrender. They learned, too late, that sometimes silence is the sound of someone building something better from the ashes of what you burned. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where are you listening to this right now? Are you in your car during a commute, at home, after a long day, or maybe even at a job that doesn't value you the way you deserve? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if this story resonated with you. And please share your thoughts. Have you ever had to make a quiet exit that spoke louder than words? Let's connect in the comments. Your story matters too.